It is August 15th, 1947. The Union Jack is coming down over the Red Fort in Delhi. The British Empire, the largest empire in human history, is surrendering control of India. We are told this happened because of politics. We are told this happened because of protests and moral pressure. We are told that Gandhi won because he was peaceful and righteous. But that is only half the story. The British did not leave India because they suddenly discovered their conscience. They left because they were broke. Gandhi did not just shame the British Empire. He bankrupted it. He did not fight them with bullets. He fought them with balance sheets. He turned the Indian population into a weapon of economic mass destruction. And the killing blow was not a bomb. It was a piece of cloth. Let me take you back to a time when Britain was the unchallenged master of global commerce. The Victorian era was not just a political triumph. It was a financial empire built on the most elegant trap ever designed. Picture London in 1850. The fog rolls through streets lined with gas lamps. The docks are choked with ships carrying timber from Canada, sugar from the Korean, tea from Ceylon, and cotton from India. The Bank of England vault holds more gold than any other institution on earth. The pound sterling is the global reserve currency. Every commodity, every transaction, every loan in the civilized world is denominated in British pounds. This is not just power. This is a money-printing machine that spans a quarter of the planet. At the heart of this machine sits Manchester. If London was the brain of the empire, Manchester was the beating heart. Walk through Manchester in 1860, and you will see something that looks like hell, but prints money like heaven. The sky is black with coal smoke. The canals are thick with chemical runoff. Children with hollow eyes work 14-hour shifts in mills that never stop roaring. But the noise of those machines is the sound of wealth being created at an industrial scale never before seen in human history. The textile mills of Lancashire are the most profitable factories on earth. They are turning raw cotton into finished cloth at a speed that makes traditional hand weaving look medieval. And every single yard of that cloth is sold at a markup that would make a modern hedge fund manager weep with envy. But here is the beautiful trap, the criminal genius of the system. The cotton does not come from England. It comes from India. The British force Indian farmers to grow cotton instead of food. They buy that cotton for pennies. They ship it to Manchester. They weave it into cloth using machines that Indians do not have. Then they ship that cloth back to India and sell it to the same people who grew the cotton in the first place. And here is the cruelest part. They destroy the Indian textile industry first, so that Indians have no choice but to buy British cloth. This is not trade. This is a protection racket. This is the economic equivalent of breaking someone's legs and then selling them crutches. Let me give you the numbers because numbers do not lie. In 1750, before the British took control, India produced 25% of the world's industrial output. The weavers of Bengal made fabric so fine that European aristocrats paid fortunes for it. A single sari could take 6 months to weave and cost more than a house. The Mughal economy was larger than the British economy. India was rich. But by 1900, after 150 years of British rule, India's share of global manufacturing had collapsed to less than 2%. That is not decline. That is demolition. The British systematically destroyed the workshops, smashed the looms, and terrorized the weavers. There are accounts from British officers that describe cutting off the thumbs of master weavers so they could never teach their craft again. Whether that happened in every case or not, the result was the same. The knowledge died, the industry died, and Manchester rose on the corpse. By the time Gandhi returned to India in 1915, the trap was complete. India was exporting 400 million pounds of raw cotton every year. It was buying back 3 billion yards of finished cloth. The British were making a profit margin of over 400%. The entire system depended on one thing: Indian cooperation. The British needed Indians to grow the cotton. They needed Indians to load the ships. They needed Indians to buy the finished product. They needed Indians to believe that British cloth was superior, and that wearing it was a sign of civilization and modernity. The entire empire rested on this psychological foundation, and Gandhi saw it. Gandhi was not a traditional revolutionary. He did not believe in guns or bombs, but he understood something that most freedom fighters miss. He understood cash flow. He understood that the British Raj was not a government. It was a corporation. It had investors. It had shareholders. It had quarterly earnings to report. And if you made that corporation unprofitable, the shareholders would pull out. The soldiers would go home. The empire would collapse not because it was defeated, but because it was insolvent. Gandhi's genius was to identify the most vulnerable part of the British economic machine and attack it with a weapon that could not be stopped by police or guns. That weapon was consumer choice. In 1920, Gandhi launched the Swadeshi movement. Swadeshi means self-reliance, but in practical terms it meant one thing: stop buying British goods. Gandhi told every Indian to burn their foreign clothes and wear only khadi, hand-spun cloth made on a traditional spinning wheel. People thought he was insane. Khadi was rough. It was uncomfortable. It was slower to produce and more expensive than machine-made British cloth. Why would anyone choose it? Because Gandhi made it sacred. He turned a piece of fabric into a national symbol. He told the people of India that every rupee spent on British cloth was a bullet fired into the heart of their own country. He made wearing foreign cloth shameful. He made spinning your own cloth an act of patriotism and spiritual purity. And then he led by example. Gandhi was a British-trained lawyer. He had lived in London. He wore three-piece suits. But he took off those suits and put on a loincloth made of khadi. He sat in public with a spinning wheel and spun thread for hours every day. He spun while he gave speeches. He spun while he met with journalists. He made the act of spinning thread the most radical political statement in the world. The image of Gandhi with his spinning wheel became iconic. It was everywhere, and it sent a message that no one could ignore. If the leader of the independence movement was willing to dress like a peasant and spin his own cloth, then everyone else had to follow. The British laughed at first. Winston Churchill called him a half-naked fakir. The colonial newspapers mocked him. They said you cannot fight an industrial empire with a wooden wheel. They said it was backward and primitive. But Gandhi was not trying to outcompete Manchester on efficiency. He was trying to destroy their market, and it worked. The Indian National Congress organized massive bonfires in cities across India. Thousands of people brought their foreign clothes, their expensive suits and dresses, and threw them into the flames. It was a ritual sacrifice. It was a public declaration of independence. And it was economic warfare. Let me show you the damage. In 1920, Britain exported 1.2 billion yards of cotton cloth to India. By 1930, that number had dropped to 700 million yards. By 1935, it was down to 400 million yards. That is a collapse of 67% in 15 years. The mills of Lancashire were built on the assumption that India would always buy, but now the orders were not coming. The warehouses filled up with unsold stock. The factory owners tried to cut prices, but it did not matter. The Indian people were not buying because of price. They were not buying because of pride. You cannot undercut pride. The economic impact on Britain was catastrophic. Tens of thousands of textile workers in Manchester, Blackburn, and Bolton lost their jobs. These were multi-generational mill families. Their fathers and grandfathers had worked in those factories, and now the factories were closing. The unemployment rate in Lancashire hit 40% in some towns. The streets filled with desperate men looking for work that did not exist. The British government was in a panic. They tried tariffs. They tried subsidies. They tried propaganda campaigns to convince Indians to buy British. Nothing worked, because Gandhi had shifted the battlefield from politics to economics. And on that battlefield, the British were losing. But Gandhi was not done. He opened a second front. In 1930, he decided to attack the salt tax. Salt seems like a small thing, but in a hot country where people sweat constantly, salt is a necessity. And the British had made it illegal to produce your own salt. You had to buy it from the government, and the government taxed it at a rate of over 2,400%. A peasant who earned 5 rupees a month had to spend 1 rupee on salt. That is a 20% tax on survival. Gandhi called it a crime against humanity, and he decided to break the law in the most public way possible. On March 12, 1930, Gandhi started walking. He was 61 years old. He walked from his ashram to the coast, a distance of 240 miles. It took him 24 days. As he walked, the crowds grew. Thousands of people joined the march. Tens of thousands lined the roads to watch. The international press followed him every step of the way. The whole world was watching. And on April 6, 1930, Gandhi walked into the ocean, bent down, and picked up a lump of salt. With that single gesture, he broke the law, and he gave permission for every Indian to do the same. Within days, millions of people across India were making illegal salt. They boiled seawater in pots. They scraped salt from rocks. They sold it in the markets. The police arrested over 60,000 people, but the jails were full, the courts were overwhelmed. And the salt kept coming. The British monopoly was shattered. The revenue from the salt tax collapsed. But more importantly, the fear of British authority was broken. Once people saw that they could disobey the law and survive, the entire structure of colonial control began to crack. Now here's where the numbers become devastating. The British Empire was already under financial strain from World War I. The war had cost Britain over £35 billion. The national debt had exploded. The pound was no longer backed by gold. The economy was fragile, and now India, the most profitable colony, was becoming a money pit. The cost of policing the civil disobedience was rising every year. The British had to expand the police force. They had to keep the army on high alert. They had to build more prisons. At the same time, the revenue was collapsing. Textile exports were down. Salt tax was unenforceable. Even the alcohol tax was falling because Gandhi's followers were promoting temperance. By the late 1930s, the British were spending more to govern India than they were extracting from it. Let that sink in. The jewel in the crown had become a liability. The empire was hemorrhaging cash. And then came World War II. Britain was fighting for survival against Nazi Germany. Every pound mattered. Every soldier mattered. And they could not afford to keep a massive garrison in India just to suppress a population that refused to cooperate. In 1942, Gandhi launched the Quit India movement. He told the British to leave immediately. The British arrested him and crushed the protests with brutal force. But the cost was unsustainable. Britain ended the war technically victorious, but financially destroyed. They owed billions to the United States. They owed billions to India itself in the form of wartime loans. The country was broke, the public was exhausted, and the cost of holding India was no longer justifiable. The transfer of power in 1947 was presented as a noble act of decolonization. But the truth is simpler. The British left because they could not afford to stay. Gandhi had turned India from an asset into a liability. He had weaponized the Indian consumer. He had proven that an unarmed population could bankrupt a military superpower. Let me take you back to Manchester for a moment. In 1931, at the height of the boycott, Gandhi was invited to London for negotiations. He did something extraordinary. He asked to visit Lancashire. The British government was terrified. They thought the unemployed workers would attack him. Why would they welcome the man who destroyed their livelihoods? But Gandhi insisted. He traveled north and walked through the grim industrial towns. And something unexpected happened. The workers did not attack him. They came out by the thousands to see him. They shook his hand. They listened to his speeches, and many of them understood. These were working-class people. They had been exploited by the same system that exploited India. Gandhi told them the truth. He said, "Your poverty and our poverty come from the same source." He said, "I am not your enemy. The system is the enemy." There is a famous photograph of Gandhi surrounded by female mill workers in Darwin. They are smiling. One woman is holding his arm. It is an image of solidarity across continents and across classes. The workers respected him because he told the truth. He explained that the average Indian earned in a year what a British worker on unemployment benefits earned in a month. He did not apologize for the boycott. He explained why it was necessary, and many of them accepted it. This moment was a propaganda disaster for the British government. They had tried to turn the workers against Gandhi, but the workers saw him as a man of principle. The visit was a masterstroke, but Gandhi did not stop the boycott. He went back to India and tightened the pressure. The mills stayed closed. The chimneys stopped smoking. The factories were demolished or converted into warehouses. By the 1950s, the once mighty textile industry of Britain was a shadow of its former self. Today, Manchester is a city of museums and luxury apartments built inside the corpses of old factories. The industrial base is gone. The workers are gone. The empire is gone. And in the center of the city, there is now a statue of Gandhi. It was unveiled in 2019. Some people protested. They said, "Why are we honoring the man who destroyed our economy?" But most people accepted it, because history has a way of clarifying who was right. The legacy of Gandhi's economic war is complex. In India, The spinning wheel became a national symbol. It is in the center of the Indian flag. The Swadeshi movement created a culture of self-reliance that shaped India's economic policy for decades. But it also had costs. The obsession with protecting handloom weavers and cottage industries meant that India was slow to industrialize. For decades after independence, India's textile industry could not compete with China or Bangladesh. The Gandhian ideal of village economies held back modernization. It is a complicated legacy. Gandhi won the war against the British. But the peace required different strategies. The lesson of the Cloth War is not just about India. It is a lesson about power. We think of power as armies and weapons, but real power is economic. Sovereignty is solvency. You can have the biggest army in the world, but if you cannot pay the soldiers, the army dissolves. You can have the most advanced weapons, but if you cannot afford the fuel, the weapons are useless. Gandhi understood this. He understood that every empire is a business, and every business depends on customers. If the customers refuse to buy, the business collapses. It does not matter how many guns you have. This strategy has been used again and again. The American Civil Rights Movement used economic boycotts to break segregation. In Montgomery, Alabama, black citizens stopped riding the buses. The bus companies lost money, the city lost revenue, and the segregation laws were changed. Martin Luther King Jr. studied Gandhi. He learned that the wallet is a weapon. In South Africa, the global boycott of apartheid goods helped bring down the regime. Investors pulled out. Corporations left. The government could not sustain itself without international trade. Economic pressure works because governments and corporations care more about money than they care about morality. Today we live in a world of global supply chains. We buy products made in countries we will never visit by people we will never meet. We feel powerless. We think the corporations are too big and the governments are too strong. But Gandhi proved otherwise. He proved that ordinary people have power if they are willing to use it. Every purchase is a vote. Every rupee or dollar or pound spent is a signal. And if enough people send the same signal, the system changes. It has to, because the system runs on money, and money comes from us.